Wife cheated on me with my cousin, and my parents supported it. I cut them off and moved on, but later I came across incriminating information which shattered everything I knew. I want to start with Danny because starting with my parents is something I'm still not entirely ready to do. And the thing about therapy is that it teaches you to notice when you're avoiding something and to approach it from the side door, instead of pretending the front door doesn't exist. So Danny first, then my parents, then Margaret. Danny Pierce is my cousin on my mother's side. He's 38, 2 years older than me, grew up in Stourbridge while I grew up in Oldbury, close enough that we were in each other's lives from the beginning. His mother is my mother's sister. They're similar women, warm, loud, the kind of people who fill a room with a specific energy that makes everyone feel like the gathering was specifically for them. Danny got that quality from his mother. I always liked it in him. It made him easy to be around. He was my best man. I want that to sit there for a moment before I continue. He stood at the front of St. Michael's Church in Oldbury in September 2018 and made a speech about me that made people laugh and cry in the right proportions, and that contained, in its opening line, the sentence, "There is no better man than Owen Griffiths," and I say that as someone who has known him his entire life and has looked for the evidence every single day. He said it like he meant it. He probably did mean it, in whatever complicated way people mean things when they're doing something unconscionable alongside it. Human beings are very good at compartmentalizing. I've learned that in the past 2 years in ways I didn't want to learn it. Claire and I had been together for 4 years before the wedding. We met at a work leaving due. She was a friend of a colleague. I was there because it was a Friday and I had no particular reason not to be. We talked for most of the evening. She had the specific quality I find most compelling in people, which is a kind of directness that doesn't have aggression in it. She said what she thought without making you feel the gap between what she thought and what you thought. I found that rare. I still find it rare. I fell for it immediately. We were married for 2 years and 4 months. The alleyway. I said I'd mention it once and I will, and then I'll move past it. I've been carrying a specific accumulation of things for about 3 weeks before the alleyway. Small things individually. A text notification I saw by accident. A timing that didn't match an explanation. The way Claire looked at her phone sometimes, not guilty. Something more specific than guilty, more managed. I'm a structural engineer and I approach problems the way engineers approach things, which is, you don't act on a suspicion until you've established whether the suspicion has structural support. I was building the structural support. I found the structural support on a Tuesday evening in October. I won't describe the specifics of what I found. What I'll say is that by 9:30 on that Tuesday, I knew enough to know that the person I needed to speak to was Danny, and that the conversation I needed to have with Danny was not a conversation I was capable of having in a controlled environment. I knew where he'd be because I knew his Tuesday habits the way you know someone's habits when you've shared most of your adult life with them. He was at a pub off Corporation Street. I waited. He came out at about 10:15. He was alone. What happened in the following 4 minutes I'm going to leave undescribed except for the outcome, which is, he told me. All of it. When it started, how long it had been running, how often. He told me with the speed of someone who has been waiting to be caught and has pre-built the confession against the arrival of the moment. It had started 14 months before the alleyway, 7 months before my wedding, during the period when Claire and I were engaged and Danny was standing next to me at suit fittings and stag weekend planning sessions and pre-wedding dinners. 14 months. I'm going to move past the alleyway now, as I said I would. I went home. Claire was already in bed or pretending to be. I sat in the kitchen until 3 in the morning. Then I went upstairs and I sat in the chair in the corner of our bedroom, and I looked at her in the dark for a while, and I thought about 14 months and what 14 months contains in a life. The ordinary daily accumulation of it. The mornings and evenings and weekends and arguments and resolutions and meals cooked and plans made, and the specific texture of a shared life that I'd been living in one version of while another version was running underneath it. Then I turned the light on. What followed was the confrontation with Claire, which I'm going to summarize rather than reconstruct because it was long and loud and contained things said on both sides that belonged to that room and that night, and not to this account. What matters is the outcome, which is, she confirmed what Danny had told me. She attempted several framings of it before she found the one she settled on, which was that the marriage had never been right and she'd known it before we got married but hadn't known how to stop it. And I told her I wanted her out of the house within the week. She was out within 3 days. Then came the families. I called my mother the morning after. This is the part I need to be careful about because the way I understood it then and the way I understand it now are different, and the difference is significant. What I understood then, my mother was shocked. She came over immediately. She sat with me in the kitchen for 3 hours. She was angry in the specific way of a mother whose child has been wronged, the particular fury of someone who takes a harm done to their child as a harm done to themselves. She held me while I was not at my best. She said Danny had always had a self-serving streak and she should have seen it coming. She said Claire had never deserved me. She said all the things a mother says when she's furious on her child's behalf. I believed all of it. Why wouldn't I? It was my mother. My father was similar, quieter. He's always been the quieter of the two, but equally present, equally apparently appalled. He came with my mother, sat across the kitchen table, said the right things. He took me to the pub that evening and bought me several pints and let me talk for 3 hours and said very little but said it well. I left the pub feeling, for the first time in 48 hours, slightly less like I was standing in a building that had lost its foundations. The extended family got the news in the way extended family always gets the news, through the specific informal distribution network of a large West Midlands family, where information travels at a speed that suggests everyone is waiting for it. Aunts called, uncles sent messages, cousins reached out with varying degrees of genuine and performed sympathy. There was a gathering at my parents' house about 2 weeks after it all came out, not organized explicitly as a response to what had happened but functioning as one. The family closing around a wound in the way families do when the wound is legible and the blame is clear. Danny didn't come to the gathering. His absence was noted and acknowledged as appropriate, which it was. His mother came, my Aunt Sandra, with the specific quality of a woman who is mortified and doesn't know where to put the mortification. She apologized to me at length. I accepted the apology because she hadn't done anything and the apology wasn't hers to make, but she needed to make it and I understood that. I was in the process of beginning to build the rest of my life on the other side of this. The divorce was proceeding. I'd started talking to a solicitor. I was seeing a therapist once a week, a man named Dr. Rashid in Bearwood who has the specific quality of someone who has heard everything and is still paying attention, which is what you need in that room. I was, slowly and with considerable difficulty, moving. Then the letter arrived. Wednesday morning, plain envelope, my name in careful handwriting, return address in Wolverhampton. The woman who wrote it was named Margaret Holloway. She was 61 years old, a retired school administrator, and she had been, and I'm going to use her phrasing because it's the most precise available, in a relationship with your father for the past 3 years. I read that sentence 4 times. Then I read the rest of the letter. Margaret had been trying to decide whether to send it for 6 months, she said. She had met my father through a mutual friend at a social group in Wolverhampton, a walking group, she specified, the specific innocent detail of a context that makes the thing that followed seem more incongruous. They had been seeing each other regularly for 3 years. She had understood their relationship to be a private but genuine one. She had not, for the first 2 years, known the full shape of the situation. She had understood my father to be in an unhappy marriage that he was managing at a distance, which is the framing men in these situations tend to use because it's the most functional available. In the 3rd year she had found out more. She had met, through the specific overlapping social geography of a city like Wolverhampton, another person, a woman named Diane. Diane, according to Margaret's letter, was my mother's equivalent. I sat on the stairs for a long time. Then I called Margaret. We met at a cafe in Wolverhampton city center the following Saturday. Margaret Holloway was a small woman with the specific careful quality of someone who has made a considered decision and is holding it with both hands. She had brought documentation, not obsessively, not in the manner of someone building a case, but in the manner of someone who understood that what she was saying was extraordinary and wanted to be taken seriously rather than dismissed. Photographs on her phone. A timeline she'd written out by hand. A reference to a specific conversation with Diane that she could recount in detail. I want to describe Margaret accurately because she matters to this account and because she was not what you might expect from this position in a story. She was not vindictive. She was not a woman scorned in the dramatic sense. She said clearly, and without apparent bitterness, that her relationship with my father had ended by mutual agreement when the full picture emerged, that she bore him no particular ill will, but that she also couldn't continue participating in a silence that she knew was actively harming someone who deserved to know the truth. She said, "I have a son. If someone knew something that was relevant to his understanding of his own life, I would want them to tell him." She told me. The shape of it, as I understood it from Margaret and from the subsequent conversation I forced with my parents, separately, then together, in the specific ugly sequence of a person dismantling the architecture of a deception that has been running for years. My parents had each been conducting their own separate affairs for a period that was difficult to establish precisely, but that Margaret and the evidence she'd gathered suggested was at least 4 years. Not with the same person, not with each other's knowledge initially, though by the time everything came out it was clear they'd both known about each other for some time and had reached a specific unspoken arrangement that allowed both situations to continue. The arrangement was silence, between them and in the family. A mutual non-disclosure built on mutual exposure. When Danny and Claire's affair became the story, when I called my mother at 8 in the morning after the confrontation and the family gathered, and the wound was legible and the blame was distributed, my parents had been, simultaneously, the most vocal witnesses to my grievance and the most invested parties in the grievance, remaining the only story being told. I had given them cover. Not deliberately, not through any action of mine, simply by being the person who got hurt, by bringing my hurt to the people who were supposed to be its shelter. I had inadvertently provided the people who were supposed to shelter me with a narrative that eclipsed their own. The family's attention had been on me. My parents' own situations had remained untouched, unexamined, unquestioned. They had held me while I cried and been furious on my behalf, and the fury was real, and the holding was real, and none of that had prevented them from being exactly what they were. I've spent a long time with that, trying to understand how a person holds those things simultaneously. I've gotten somewhere with it, not to the place of forgiving it, but to the place of understanding it, which are different destinations, and I don't want to confuse them. The confrontation with my parents was the worst thing I've done in terms of how I managed it, and I want to be honest about that. I went to their house on a Sunday. I didn't warn them. I had Margaret's information and I had verified enough of it independently, through conversations with people I trusted, through my own careful inquiry, to be certain of what I was bringing. I sat them down in their own living room and I told them what I knew. My mother's first response was denial, which lasted about 4 minutes before it became untenable against the specific detail I had. Then it became explanation. The marriage had been complicated for a long time. They'd both found their own way of managing it. It wasn't something they'd planned. My father's response was quieter and in some ways harder to be in the room with. He didn't defend himself in any sustained way. He just sat with it, with the expression of a man who has known this moment was coming and is on the other side of resisting it. I said what I needed to say. I said it in a way I'm not entirely proud of, the specific loss of control of someone who has been building toward a confrontation for 2 weeks and isn't fully in possession of himself when it arrives. I said some things I would phrase differently now. The substance of what I said was accurate. The delivery was not always measured. I told them I was done. I meant it, I've kept to it. The cutting off happened in stages rather than all at once, which is how it actually works, which isn't how it gets described. You imagine cutting off a family as a single decision, a door closing, and on one side the door closes and on the other side you're free. It's not like that. It's more like a series of smaller closings. The not calling, the not answering, the not going, the not responding to the birthday message that arrives 6 months later with the specific energy of someone testing whether the door might have moved. Each small closing is its own thing. The accumulation of them is the cutoff. I was in therapy through all of it. Dr. Rashid Bearwood, once a week and then twice a week during the worst of it, and then back to once as things settled. I want to say something about therapy that is accurate rather than the generic thing people say about therapy, which is that it helps, full stop, which is true but insufficient. What therapy actually did was give me a specific reframing of a question I'd been asking wrong. I'd been asking, how do I forgive this? As though forgiveness was the destination and the therapy was the route there. Dr. Rashid redirected that. He said, what would forgiving them give you? Not them, you. What would you have that you don't have now? I thought about it for a week and came back and said, I don't know. He said, that might be the most honest thing you've said in this room. We spent several months working out what I actually needed, which turned out to be different from forgiveness. What I needed was to understand the shape of what had happened without it being the shape of me. The thing about a betrayal of this scale, the layered nature of it, the specific horror of finding that the people who were supposed to be your shelter were themselves the source of some of the damage, is that it wants to become your identity. You become the person this happened to. Every room you walk into, you carry the taxonomy of it. The unfaithful wife, the treacherous cousin, the parents who covered it up to protect themselves. Dr. Rashid helped me put it down, not forget it down, like a bag you've been carrying that you set on the floor and leave there. You know it's there. You don't have to carry it everywhere you go. I'm still working on the putting down. Some days I'm better at it than others. The days I'm worst at it are the days something ordinary happens. A Sunday afternoon with nothing to do. A family occasion I see referenced on someone's social media. The specific ache of a birthday in November that I used to spend at my parents' house. And the absence of what I lost is very precise and very present. Here is what I know now that I didn't know at the beginning. I know that the people who are supposed to protect you are people first and protectors second, and their personhood includes the capacity for self-interest that overrides the protection when the cost of protecting gets too high. I don't say this cynically. I say it as a fact I've had to integrate. My parents loved me. I believe that. Their love for me did not prevent them from choosing their own protection over my right to understand my own life. Both of those things are true simultaneously, and I've had to build a structure in myself that can hold both without one canceling the other. I know that betrayal is rarely simple. Danny's betrayal was simple in outline and complicated in execution. The best man who spent 2 years looking at me across tables knowing what he knew. Claire's betrayal had its own interior that I'll never fully have access to. My parents' betrayal was the most complex of all because it was both active, the covering up, the holding of information, and passive, in the sense that they had their own mess they were managing, and I stumbled into the shelter they were providing at the worst possible moment for everyone. I know that cutting people off is less dramatic than people think and more necessary than people allow. My extended family has mostly respected my decision. Some of them pushed back initially, the specific pushback of people who believe that family should be maintained at any cost, which is a belief I understand the appeal of and no longer share. Aunt Sandra still sends me a card at Christmas with a message that is exactly as long as it needs to be to communicate that she's thinking of me without requiring a response. I appreciate it in the way I appreciate things that ask nothing of me. I know that I'm going to be all right, not in the motivational poster sense. In the specific sense of, I have a flat in Harborne that is mine, a job that I'm good at and that gives me something to think about that isn't this, a therapist who is patient with the pace of my processing, and a small number of friends who knew me before all of this and know me during it and will know me after. That's enough. It's more than enough, actually. It's most of what matters. The thing about losing a large family all at once is that it clarifies, very efficiently, what the large family was actually composed of. Some of it was real, and the loss of it is real. Some of it was furniture, the ambient presence of people who occupied the edges of your life without occupying the center of it, and the furniture you learned to live without faster than you expected. What I've kept is small and solid. That's better than what I had. I'm writing this because Dr. Rashid suggested at the end of a session about 6 weeks ago that I find a way to put the full account somewhere outside my own head. He said, "You've told me the story in fragments across 2 years. Have you ever told it whole?" I said I hadn't. He said, "There might be something useful in the telling of it whole, not for anyone else necessarily, just the act of it." This is the act of it. I don't know what it's given me exactly. Some kind of external existence for the thing, I suppose. The thing has been internal for 2 years, circling, recurring, showing up at inconvenient hours, and now it exists somewhere else too, and that changes the way it sits. My cousin Danny, as of the last information I have, is still in Stourbridge. I don't know the specifics of his life and I don't seek them out. The alleyway and what happened in it is something I've discussed with Dr. Rashid at length and have reached a specific understanding about, which is, I'm not proud of it. It was the action of a person in extremis rather than the action of the person I want to be. And I'm done punishing myself for it because the punishing doesn't produce anything useful, and I've done enough of it. Claire I know even less about. She moved away from the area shortly after the divorce was finalized. I don't know where. I don't need to know. My parents sent me a card on my birthday in November. It was signed from both of them in my mother's handwriting. I read it once and put it in the recycling. Then I took it out of the recycling and put it in the drawer in my bedside table because I'm apparently not as done with them as I sometimes tell myself I am. I haven't opened the drawer since. That's where I am with it. I'm 36 years old. I live alone and I'm fine with that. I go to therapy on Tuesday evenings. I take long walks on Sunday mornings in the specific aimless way that is one of the only things I can consistently rely on to make my head quieter. I am, by most measures, doing all right. The bag is on the floor. Some days I forget it's there. Those are the good days, and there are more of them than there used to be. That's enough. That's what I've got.